Okay guys, so I kind of messed up my truck. Basically, to put it honestly to you, I pulled into a gas station about 3.5 weeks ago, and there was some power steering wine. So I'm like, okay, we'll get some power steering fluid and top it off, right? Well, stupidly, what did I do? I put the power steering fluid in the brake fluid reservoir. I didn't look that well. I thought I was tired. Oh, this must be it, right? Big mistake. Don't ever do this. I learned a big lesson here. I should have looked a little bit. There's my power steering fluid. So what I did, I put power steering fluid in there, and power steering fluid is petroleum based, whereas brake fluid is alcohol based. So you can see this is really swollen and bubbled up. The petroleum absorbs into all of the rubber seals throughout the master cylinder, the brake booster, your calipers, and whatever rubber there is in the system. So at that, the brakes went spongy, and see that name tag? Diesel. There you go. He's the channel's mascot. So yeah, I've got to fix this thing. Basically, I've got to replace the brake booster, all the calipers, and the master cylinder. Now, I tried looking into a rebuild kit for the calipers, but they don't make them for newer model vehicles. So I've got to take all 4 wheels off, get the calipers off, take them in. There's like a $50 core charge. So I got to take those in so I can get the new calipers. They're going to be in at 5 o'clock today. And same with the brake booster. I got the master cylinder in the truck up here, the other Cummins. Yeah, good thing we have 2. Otherwise, I would have been screwed. So that's what's up. And okay, you guys, so I'm out here working on the Cummins. As you know, I've redone my brake system, all new calipers, new brake booster, and new master cylinder. But basically what I'm doing here, I didn't want to buy a leveling kit because it makes it ride bad, and I don't want it to sit any higher with these stock wheels. So I'm going to lower the back end. So in order to do that, these 3 blocks underneath your leaf springs, you're going to remove those. So here's the process. I've already finished the other side. It's back together. But basically, what you do, you're going to take off your U-bolts that mount on the axle, kind of like that, straight up. They go through and they mount on the side of each leaf spring with this bracket here. So they sit there like that, and then the U-bolts go up through these 2 holes. So you disconnect those. It helps if you have PV Blaster, spray on them if you're using hand tools. So I sprayed that, got those nuts off, pop that off, and then I opted just to replace these bolts. So I went to Home Depot and bought some replacement bolts for it. Ain't love it, alright? So I got some bolts with a lock nut on them. And so basically what we're going to do, I got to take the bolt out for the bottom shock over here so we can drop this axle out of the way. And then I'm going to cut the heads off the bottom, just because these things like to spin and I don't have any vice grips with me. So I'm just going to cut the heads off the bottom and pull them up through the top, which is what I did on the other side, and it worked well. So that's the idea. And then I'm going to move these 3 blocks on top to spread the to make the U-bolts work, because the threads don't go all the way down. So that's the process. I'm gonna go ahead and get to it and show you guys how it works. Okay, so bolts out of the bottom shock. So we got that taken care of. Then have a jack underneath the axle, just so that you can lower it down and then pick it back up so you can get the bolts back in. So basically what you do now, you have a plastic align cap that will go in this hole here. But there's a hole all the way through, right here, all the way through these leaf springs. So when you take these 3 blocks out, you put the plastic piece back in on your main load-bearing leaf spring. So you leave that one in, and you take out these 3 blocks. So that's the idea. Basically, the hardest part is getting these bolts out. I don't think I can do it just with a pair of pliers on the bottom, as it likes to spin. So probably be cut them off like I did the other side, unfortunately, but that's what you got to do. So far so good. Shouldn't take that long, and we'll get it back together. Okay, so once you take these bolts out, once you relieve the pressure, I use the grinder to relieve the pressure, and I cut them off. I ended up cutting them off at the top just because it was a little bit easier to get to, so I didn't have to bend over. But you want to make sure you have this clamp on there because it's going to relieve all the pressure on the springs, and they'll go every which way. So make sure you got those in there so that your bolts will line up properly and go all the way through, which they will. I just took them out, so make sure you got that, and after which you will get your other pack of spacers here, and they've got this little plastic clip, so to get that out, you turn it upside down, get a punch, and knock that puppy out. And then on the bottom side here, you got this center hole. You just slide this little keeper, it's plastic, you just slide it in there, tap it in there with a hammer, and you're good to go. It'll line up right there in that little hole, and then you're going to put your bolts in bottom up, so like so, and then your nuts will come out the top, and you want to make sure they're long enough because all these are going to go back up on top, all 3 of them, including this one with the bolt through it. And then you're going to put this back on here like so, and then your U-bolts will then hold the whole thing back together from the axle all the way up to the top. So that's the idea. We're going to go ahead and get back into it. Thought I'd give you an update, so stick around. It's not done yet. You want to do it right, so here goes nothing. Okay, so I got the little plastic keeper in there. Just tapped it out with a screwdriver, put it back in with the hammer, and then I slid my bolts up through the bottom. You can see that. So we got that, and then we just basically go through and reinstall these, all 3 of them. And it appears I got this kind of right in the way, so I'm gonna have to move that. There we go. So you put all 3 of these back in. Make sure your bolts are all the way up through. And just thread your nuts on. These have the plastic in there, so it locks it in. They have just enough so that they tighten down and hit the Teflon. And then this basically just sits on top like that. Locks it all in. Now if you had longer bolts, you could put washers on top of that, but really it's not necessary. All this is doing is just keeping the leaf springs underneath the axle without moving. So this is just clamping down the leaf springs themselves, make sure everything's tight. So I'm going to go through and tighten these down, and then we'll set the bracket up on top, and then throw our U-bolts in, raise up the axle, and we'll get to it. Okay, so we got it done. Bolts in, these 2 recessed down in this top plate, and it's all tight. So shock absorber bolts back in. All that's left now is to put the tire on, and we will do that and see what it looks like, get it on the ground.